Martha Delgado. Tenemos como ponentes a Blas L. Pérez Hernández, director de California Global Energy, Water and Infrastructure Innovation Initiative at Stanford University. Perdón. A Jan Gianvitra, cofundador y CEO de Perfecto de México. A Iván Ortiz Monasterio, Senior Scientist, CIMIT México. Y Dylan Roman, CEO of REC, Reinicia el Ciclo. Sean todos ustedes bienvenidos. Y la intención pues es tener un foro abierto donde pues platiquemos sobre estos temas de interés de todos los que estamos aquí en la mesa y todos los presentes. Y una vez realizado esto, pues abriremos el diálogo para una conversación con el público que hoy nos acompaña. Entonces, Subsecretaria Martha Delgado, cedo el uso de la voz. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Voy a hablar en español.
Sí.
Porque aquí tengo el discurso, o sea, todos hablamos español, los ponentes, todos. Okay. Muy bien. Entonces, muchas gracias, mucho gusto. Es un placer para mí dirigirme a ustedes y moderar esta sesión. Es muy importante para nosotros en esta agenda internacional contemporánea. Por supuesto, nuevamente les damos la más cordial bienvenida a nuestros panelistas, Blas Pérez, a Dylan Roman, a Iván Ortiz Monasterio, a Jan Gianvitra y Enrique Meso, que estás ya con nosotros. Obviamente, una idea que en constante mención se desarrolla en este evento es que la tecnología está transformando nuestras vidas desde un punto de vista social, desde un punto de vista económico y por supuesto también en la esfera ambiental, en la esfera de los derechos. Los cambios tecnológicos acelerados causan impactos importantes en el planeta, obviamente también tienen un incremento en la huella de carbono, en nuestra excesiva explotación natural, se genera pues basura electrónica. Es muy importante enfrentar esta crisis desde múltiples perspectivas: del cambio climático, económica, la pérdida de la biodiversidad, la desertificación y la contaminación. El uso correcto de la tecnología es evidente que puede incrementar o hacer mejor la calidad de vida para las personas. Esto también puede facilitar una justa transición a una economía sostenible, baja en carbono, el uso de la tecnología. Y sin embargo, la cooperación internacional es sumamente importante para asegurarnos que esta transferencia de tecnología y de capacidades, de construcción de capacidades, sea una realidad. Esto más que nada también en los países en desarrollo. En este panel vamos a escuchar las experiencias de emprendedores de la región que han encontrado en la ciencia y la tecnología una oportunidad única para promover los negocios en materia de sustentabilidad ambiental, prácticas, modelos de desarrollo de pues, proyectos ambientales sostenibles. Y nuestro primer panelista es el doctor Blas Pérez, es un investigador senior de la Preker Institute for Energy en la Universidad de Stanford y también dirige el programa de Economía Limpia 2050 de la Universidad de Stanford. Él fundó y ha servido como director de la California Global Energy, Water and Infrastructure Innovation Initiative en la Universidad de Stanford y se ha enfocado en el desarrollo regional bajo en carbón y de sus oportunidades. Su investigación y su enseñanza en los centros de política de análisis para avanzar en la innovación limpia, diría yo, además a través de las novedades tecnológicas, a través de los negocios, la política pública y las soluciones sociales por una economía limpia, cero en carbón, y futuro neutral en carbón ha sido pues el centro de su trabajo y de sus investigaciones. Me gustaría mucho preguntar al doctor Pérez en relación a la Nexus, la aproximación del Nexus Approach cómo puede tener un impacto importante en contra del cambio climático.
So much to the ministry.
¿Repito todo?
No.
No repito todo.
Basically, I do a lot of things at Stanford. I'm Mexican. The Clean Economy program is called Mexico Clean Economy 2050. It's a regional program. And yeah, we are focusing on novel solutions, not only on the technology side, but also on policy, business models, and social innovation. But thank you to the ministry. Thank you to the organizers for inviting us. You know, the Nexus perspective, it's something that had emerged recently, no more than probably 15 years. People were starting to think that, hey, to solve this huge problem of climate change, we have to start thinking, you know, about the interconnections and interdependencies of sectors. So first was the concerns about food security, water stress, and then the business community at the World Economic Forum started thinking, hey, well, there are other interactions. And one of them has been the water, energy, food nexus. But the whole point of this is that climate change is affecting humans, biodiversity, and basically the planet. So it's a systems of systems kind of problem. And so we need to have a view in terms of any kind of solution that we can come up, a holistic view of the problem, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary, as well as breaking all the silos in government and the turf wars, because sometimes even governments, they fight, hey, this is my area, this is your area. We can't do that anymore. We have to solve the problem in a coordinated, multi-sectoral way and bring everybody in society. And we gotta understand when we say science is doing a lot of stuff, but also we need to understand the wisdom of the communities that they have millenary knowledge of, you know, what affects their community. So that's in general what the perspective is, or the approach. We are developing its tools mostly right now to assess or quantify issues. We're now learning about how these interactions have to affect policy, public policy, and create new governance around it. And the evolution of that is now really how to work out and balance the competing interests of different sectors of the economy or society, like industry, agriculture, cities, or mining, land use, on scarce resources like water or clean air, and how we're going to balance that. So with that, I will leave it as a basic academic introduction for the panel.
Great. Dr. Blas Perez, thank you very much. Technology have thousands of applications. It's crucial for fighting back against climate change. And thank you for telling us more about your experience on clean innovation so that we can actually see hope to reach net zero emissions future. Following up, Dylan Roman, who has training as an energy and urban management engineer and has worked as a consultant in different companies for projects mainly related to issues of renewable energy, resource efficiency, and reduction of plastic pollution. Undoubtedly, these experiences were the motivation for the creation of this initiative, Restart the Cycle, which seeks to raise awareness about the negative impacts on health and the environment as a result of improper handling of electronic waste. Very interesting. So it's your turn.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation. And I would actually go back to what the Chancellor was actually questioning us today, which is how to go from dialogue to action, specifically. No? And we actually tried to understand who has the highest awareness and feels the most responsibility about electronic waste in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And we identified through human-centered design that it is between 16 and 21-year-old human beings that are the most aware and that feel the most responsibility. So we decided to go and work with them. No, those are our target. So we decided to reach them through the universities and the high schools and talk to them about environmental aspects related to electronics through the universities. Part of my team is also here, knocked over 1,000 doors from universities, and 60 allowed us to give environmental education for free, only 5.5%. Still, we reached 7,500, more than 7,500 students, and we talked about them. Well, we practically just opened the black box of what is inside the electronics and where does it come from. And when we talked about Nexus, climate change, it feels very intangible. And for 16-year-olds, they don't know what to talk or say about it. So, but if you say, inside your electronics, there's a battery, and this battery, lithium and cobalt battery, is being mined today under these circumstances. Children are working today. 40,000 children are working today in the mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo to mine cobalt that is inside our electronics. So this is something that a 16-year-old understands. They relate to that. That's something they feel more than understand. And then we went further and explained them, okay, what happens if you toss it, if you just like throw it away and put it in the garbage? And we explained them also what happens in the informality in Mexico nowadays, and how the materials inside our electronics are being recovered. There are plastics with brome containing contaminants inside our electronics, flame retardants. If these are released, they're extremely dangerous. And what is happening today to recover the electronics is that these are being thrown practically in acid to recover metals like gold, platinum, and copper. So if you tell this to a 16-year-old, they also understand that. And then it's one day we call to action. That's the moment when after they felt and understood the problem, and we tell them also about the 66% less emissions that are emitted if you recycle the materials inside the electronics, and then you call to action, then they act as well. So we invite them to go to their homes and ask their parents, what are we doing with this box of electronics that all of us have under our beds or in our drawers? What are we doing with it? They told me at school that it's pretty toxic and that it has to be disposed correctly. And we invite them to bring it to the schools, and we practically recycle them from there. So that's what we do.
That's a great experience. Thank you very much for sharing with us. Undoubtedly, education is one of the key features for also the correct implementation of any technological advancement. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Ivan Ortiz. Ivan is an agronomist and principal scientist at the International Center Development of Corn Wheat, the CIMIT. We call CIMIT in Spanish. He focuses on plant nutrition and soil fertility as a means to improve nutrients use efficiency in cereal systems through crop management and improvement, with the objective of increasing productivity, nutritional quality, and profitability while reducing also environmental impact. His research has involved the development of technologies as well as technology transfer to farmers' field. So the question from your experience, how can we improve or procure food security systems that work for people and also the environment?
Well, first, thank you for the invitation. It's great to be with you here today. For me, it's an easy question because that's precisely what my institution has been doing for the last 75 years.
Yeah.
Trying to summarize, we see one component that is very important, that is high-yielding varieties. We have a gene bank. We have the biggest gene bank for wheat and maize, where we get varieties. We introduce new traits into our breeding programs, like tolerance to drought, tolerance to heat. And we see climate change as the biggest challenge for us to meet our mission. And our mission is to increase the productivity of maize and wheat systems in a sustainable way. And we see this as the biggest challenge. So in addition to the plant breeding and developing high yielding varieties, the other component is the crop management. How are we going to manage these varieties? And we've been developing and extending a system called conservation agriculture, which we think is the key for sustainable systems. So conservation agriculture requires that you leave crop residue on the soil surface, you minimize soil movement, and you introduce a rotation. And we see as the building block of agriculture to have these practices. And then on top of that, you can add machinery, you can add good weed management, et cetera, et cetera. But the key to maintain our soil, because for the production system to remain viable over time or sustainable, we need to keep the biology and the life of the soil. So we need to incorporate organic matter, which is a win-win situation, because while we're doing this, we can capture carbon in the soil and help mitigate climate change. And the third challenge that we have is how to extend these technologies more effectively to farmers. And we were fortunate to receive funding from the Mexican government for the last 10 years. We had a program called Masagro that allowed us to develop what we call the hub model, which is a way to extend these technologies more efficiently. Basically, it's an area where you establish the new technologies, the new varieties. You invite all the stakeholders like farmers, input dealers, the people that buy the grain, extension agents, government, and together they look at the technologies. And one of the key factors of this new model is that when a farmer wants to adopt a new technology, there will be a farmer advisor that will go hand in hand with him to adopt these new technologies. And we're now starting to extend this hub model in Guatemala, Honduras, and very soon in Colombia and Peru.
Great, thank you very much. I know that the great work that you are doing in CIMIT, it is an institution that it is based in Mexico, but it is an international institution. And thank you very much for sharing with us. Our next speaker is Mr. Jan Hinrichta, who is co-founder and CEO of Perfecta. He's currently challenging the status quo in Latin American food system with the aim to reduce food waste that occurs due to the supply chain inefficiencies and also strict industry standards around aesthetics. He has a great experience in the food business and innovation around this sector, and you're very welcome to this panel. When we waste food, we also waste all the energy and the water that is related to the production of these food that is taken for the grow, harvest, transport, and the package of this food. So I don't know if my knowledge is right, but more or less 46% of food is wasted in the world. Maybe you can also talk about that. But the question is, what are the measures that companies, startups are implementing to avoid the environmental consequences of food waste?
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for having me. Hello, everyone. And so to go maybe like to start with the problem of food waste as such, today we see that globally more than 1/3 of all the food that we produce ends up wasted. That's generally the same, be it in the US, be it in Europe, be it in Latin America. What changes is a little bit where that food ends up wasted across the supply chain. What we see in Latin America, for example, is that most of the food ends up wasted across the supply chain. So that's between harvest to the distribution, right? So before it gets to the point of sale or to the restaurant or to consumers' homes. That's very different to the US, for example, where most is wasted at the consumer level. Now, when we saw that, we wanted to understand, okay, why is so much food being wasted? Because that has a lot of different negative implications. As you mentioned, all the energy that goes into producing that food is wasted as well. All the money that we invest in creating the food as well. think about the water that we use. Globally, it's over 20% of sweet water that is being used for agriculture. If we're looking at Mexico specifically, all the food that we waste, the water that it took to create it, would be the usage of the Mexican population for more than 2 years. So it's a huge amount of water that's being wasted together with the food. On top of that, food waste also creates greenhouse gas emissions. Actually, it's around 8 to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions that are linked to food waste. So that's much more than the aviation industry is creating. So it's a problem that we often don't realize how big it actually is. Now, at Perfecto, what we want to do is essentially ensure that there's less food that ends up on landfills. How do we do that? We work directly with producers such as farmers, but also consumer good companies that have products that are not being accepted by the supermarket. Why are they not being accepted? Because maybe the product is not nicely looking. Maybe the produce is too big or too small. Something very crazy is also, if we think about avocado production here in Mexico, that is growing at a rapid pace because there's always more avocados being consumed in the US, for example. When they export avocados to the US, they're only accepted if they weigh at least 1 pound. So now think about all the other avocados that don't weigh 1 pound. Where do they end up? Well, on landfills. So what we do at Perfecto is we find a home for these avocados. We sell them directly via subscription box to our customers so that they can help us to reduce food waste. And by doing so, we're doing different things. On one side, we're making nutritious food more accessible, because that's another problem, unfortunately. The price of food, like fruits and veggies, milk, eggs, are increasing across Latin America, while like unhealthy food doesn't increase in price at the same pace. So on one side, we're making food more accessible, but on the other side, we're also educating people that just because a fruit or veggie is a bit smaller or ugly looking doesn't mean it's not good, right? And ultimately, our goal is to really change the food system as such that retailers lower their standards around what they accept. Because to give you another example that blew my mind, when we think about bananas in the supermarket, think about bananas. If you have a picture in mind, it's probably a bunch of bananas. It's not one banana, am I right? Well, the reason is because supermarkets only buy bananas that come in a bunch. And often they have to have 5 to 6 bananas in the bunch. So what do you do if there's 7 bananas at the bunch? You put one away. What happens with that one banana? Well, it gets wasted. But it's just as good as the other ones, right? So that's why we're doing what we do at Perfecto. But we are not the only ones tackling that problem in Mexico. There's other companies that tackle food waste at different stages, because ultimately it's such a big problem that we cannot solve alone. There's companies like Safe Fruit that help that fruits maintain a longer shelf life. There's companies like Chief that tackle food waste at the point of sale, so they rescue food directly from restaurants. So there's a lot of things that are coming up, but certainly this is just the start, and we need more innovation in this space.
Do you know what is perfecto?
Sorry?
Guacamole.
Yeah, it is. It is.
You can get a avocado, and you can produce guacamole.
Exactly.
Baby food with banana, something like that.
I love that. See, that's actually one of our goals is now to create also upcycled products. We actually already have a coffee that is called Mezcla Perfecto. Why? Because it's being done with coffee beans that are not being accepted because maybe the toast was a bit too high, maybe they broke on the way, So now we're starting to do that, and hopefully soon you will see guacamole perfecto in your shelf.
So, thank you very, very much, Jan. Our last speaker is Enrique Neso. Hi. He's CEO of and then founder of Plant Squad, company that seeks to encourage plant-based food and contributing to better nutrition in Mexico and the preservation of the environment.
A lot.
Yes.
Thank you, Undersecretary. Thank you for having me here. Thank you to the audience here. I would like to start asking a question to everyone here, if it's okay.
Of course.
Who has changed the way in which they eat after the pandemic? Who has been more mindful regarding what you are eating? There's a lot of people, yeah. who has decided to incorporate more plants in their food? There we go, we got a market. Yeah. So thank you for that. So Plant Squad is a company 100% Mexican, and we started the company with curiosity out of environment and health. And one of the topics that is more relevant for us was when Beyond Meat and these large companies across the US and Europe were launching these new products, and there was a lot of buzz regarding these products, the ingredients, and what was going on. So the team were four co-founders in the company. We were asking ourselves, how come Mexico, with the power of biodiversity, ingredients, land, and everything that we have here, how come we cannot develop a product that could be in that standard? So we started with that, and we were not able to find too much of that development in technology. So we needed to go to other countries and understand how that was being done, and we decided to start with our formulas. But we had two views in how to do this. First, it was the market. When were people going to start eating more plants, and not plants that look like meat or chicken or seafood or shrimp or other type of animal protein products? But the other problem was, how are we going to make people change? How can we nudge the way in which people are deciding either to select products from Perfecto or decide to go for plant-based food? And one of the major challenges that we found had to do with human behavior, right? Is why are we going to take this option if we can have environmental effects, if we can have a better health? And that has to do with the knowledge that we believe, or the idea that sometimes we have, in which the decisions that we make every day are not necessarily that effective in changing things in the world, right? So being entrepreneurs and being crazy, we decided that didn't matter, that we were going to go to the market and we were going to launch these products, but we decided to develop multiple products, not only burgers, as it was happening in the US, or nuggets, because what we think is that people are deciding for these products for different reasons, but one has to do with variety and for every moment of consumption. So we developed a platform, non-beef, non-chicken, non-fish, and multiple others, to put those products in Mexico. And to this day, fortunately, we're the only clean label brand in Mexico and plant-based with Nutri-Score A standards for European market, the only B label brand in Mexico. And that has been product of Mexican scientists working in our team and developing these products. But on the other hand, it is a larger base of consumers deciding to eat differently. And the interesting thing is that this has an effect on the environment also, but people are coming to this effect for different reasons. One of those has to do with the way in which we look, and we want to be thinner, or whatever reason, so they go through that avenue. Other people are deciding for these type of products for animal protection, and that's an important issue in the vegan plant-based industry. But the other one has to do with environment protection, and something that I'm truly glad and happy, and I believe my peers here in the panel have seen this in their different fields, that there is a larger understanding of how we can make things better. And we decided to tackle that in Plant Squad through plant-based food, and that's what we're doing.
Great. How many vegetarians are here? Yeah. Really? I'm the only one. Two, three. Okay. So I want to ask you, I have a closing remarks here, but I rather prefer to ask you the role of education, because in every of the improvements of technology or application of research and development regarding this specific matter, I have heard that education is important for waste management, for what to eat, how to produce, and I would love to really ask you a quick thought about the role of education in your work. Please.
I think, education, something that I learned in these 2 years that we've been doing this is it does not only go through the mind, it has to go through your body, practically. You have to feel it. If you don't feel it, if it only goes through your mind, you lose it immediately, practically.
I think for us, similar to that, I think when people hear imperfect produce, imperfect food, they immediately think something's wrong, no? And they think, oh, okay, I can't eat it. And so similarly to what Dylan is mentioning, we had the same problem with education in the beginning, where people were like, I'm not sure if I should buy this, no, because it says it's imperfect. But once they receive the box, or they see their family and friends receiving a box, or they see it on social media, they realize, hey, these things actually look perfect. No, that's why it's perfecto. No, that's why it's a small imperfection within the perfection. But education really, I think, helps to understand, like, or bring down misconceptions that you might have had before. So that's a little bit how we have seen that.
So I'll say from a consumer perspective, I think it's about being self-empowered to understand the decisions that we're making. I mean, sometimes when we're in these forums talking about plant-based food, so the first question, and I hope I don't get this one here, but is like, okay, it's great what you're doing, but how come you're making plants look like beef, right? So that's awful, I don't want to eat that. And then we explain them that all of these ingredients are natural, everything is non-GMO, it's a great product with all color and conservatives are natural. And at the end, the conversation goes to, I don't get it. It's not that clear. I believe it's natural, but it's kind of weird that it looks like chicken. I don't know. So I'd rather stick with my usual Coca-Cola and McDonald's and stuff like that. And it's like, that type of decision is something that you need to get involved with the information that you're getting. And in this time, I believe it applies to any field, but we have a bunch of information, and consumers and people and we need to be proactive in understanding that information, being self-educated. Education is a process that is ongoing, to decide and select what things or which actions are better for ourselves. So that's important in the way, talking about consumers being in retail stores. But on the other hand, it's also about common sense, I believe, which is, I mean, if you're taking plants that are being harvested in the fields that the professor here is working on, and you're learning about people doing different things and initiatives to make things different, I believe that that's again being proactive and looking into that and deciding for that. So wrapping up is about being self-empowered to learn more, to understand more, even though there's a lot of information, and there you'll find a lot.
Great.
Yeah, well, education is an integral part of what we do at Summit. We call it capacity building. We provide a lot of training courses to farmers and farm advisors on the new technologies. But we also do another type of education. Like whenever I give a talk to farmers, I tell them that their one simple management practices, like how much nitrogen fertilizer I'm going to apply, has implications well beyond their plot. There's emissions of greenhouse gases, there's contamination of bodies like marine systems or lakes, and then there's also leaching and polluting the aquifers. So, this is another type of education that we need to do with farmers that don't realize that those simple actions they make have implications well beyond their plots.
Well,
Last but not least.
thank you. Well, coming from a university, I think education is that central. But I was just going to point out a common theme that came up. I think it's about cultural change, and education helps, and how we conceptualize things. So one of the things that has come up in the panel is that we have to stop thinking about waste, but we have to think about resource recovery. We're recovering resources from urban mining, where all of the phones and computers and all that kind of stuff. You're recovering a resource that was going to go to not the right use, and so there's a lot of things that are coming up. For instance, and connecting it to the first concept of Nexus, like in corn, tortillas. There's researchers now analyzing how to extract from the waterway or the water some minerals to apply in other industries. But anyway, so educators, we're asking the world to change. There's a new concept and everybody mentions it, but nobody really understands how to make it happen, which is sustainability. Stanford, for the first time in 75 years, just launched a new school of sustainability, or school of sustainability. That's enough, $2 billion. So we're asking the world to change. Education has also changed. So we're learning on how to now educate the next generation of innovators, the people who work in the field, who are finding solutions for specific on how to bring sustainability. We are very good at, for instance, in this case, to use digital tools for resource efficiency, optimize. We're very good at that. We're now working on AI to speed up innovation because the problems we're talking about need scale and we need to act with speed. So all of these concepts are now being brought into the next generation of educators, research, and innovation.
Thank you very much. I think that we have had a very interesting exchange of ideas. I would like, just for closing remarks, to say that sometimes we think that we need to change education in order for the process of the learning process, change the way of people behavior from this point to the other. But also we have to change the understanding of how people make decisions. Because it is a complex process. It's changing minds and understanding why are you going to pick this or that avocado or this or that product. Now, I have been, working on environmental education for a long time, and I have seen that, young people is more alike to change and to participate and to be more conscious and committed with the processes around them. So we have to take advantage of that kind of innovative experience. Young people, they want to, not now, they don't like to have cars, more things are not that frivolistic as that, but they want to really commit on causes, maybe for innovation, technology, but also environmental and human rights. They need to fit in this new century where people is doing things differently. They want to go for the offices to work. They want to have these, iPads and phones. So we need to take advantage of these changes that they already are implementing to introduce the ones that are less water intensive or energy intensive, or about the form or the color of a vegetable. And of course, taking into account that we have to try to bring right public policies for all, and also being make these things interesting and fun. In my perspective, that is a very good mix for getting things done. And I thank all of you for the interest of being in this panel, and thank the panelists for giving us your thoughts about this relevant matter. Thank you.
Thank you, the panelists, for this very interesting presentation and everything that was here brought throughout your experience. So I would like to open the panel just for a few questions. We have about 25 minutes or so after we go to break. So I would open the panel just to be orderly in this matter, and then we will take that question and we try to be brief in order for more people to get this opportunity to ask something. So we don't have a microphone, so I would be worried. So yes, please, thank you. If you could just state your name and where you're coming from, and then state the question. Okay,
I will introduce myself first. So my name is Edmundo Gutierrez. I'm the General Director of the Mexican National Institute for Astrophysics, Optics, and Electronics. It's one of the 26 research Council for Science and Technology. So we are, as you can imagine, we are fully committed to do basic research, technology development. But when talking about innovation, there is always something in between. That's investment. So for going to innovation, there is one thing that we need. That's investment. We need money for that. So as a member of the CONACYT, the National Council for Science and Technology, we are eager to offer knowledge, technology, society. There is something that I want to send as a message. So we need to connect the whole change with the investment, support or transfer the knowledge that we generate.
I agree. As a startup,
Yeah.
as a startup, I agree.
We need
That we need
investment.
investment.
Same here. I just want to, the mission of Mexico Clean Economy Program is we see North America initially as Mexico has a very valuable resource. Youngest country in North America. Silicon Valley should be considered like a resource for North America. We're trying to, as a Mexican who works there, wants to bring that ecosystem. There is a nascent venture capital community focusing mostly on hubs like Monterrey, Guadalajara, Mexico City. But we need, yes, more that we have in North America. Optimize our output.
Hello to everyone. I am Pamela Escobar Vargas. I am representative of Latin America of the Global Youth and Mayors Forum. So I am, as I know, it's very, very important that the topic of climate change and the plant-based models has been included in this forum. And more when the global food system is killing millions of people and animals, accentuating the climate emergency and the inequalities on the international society, of course, as a result of a whole system that is the capitalism and the speciesism. So my question is how to increase the plant-based diet or the links between the companies. For example, the Plant Squad and the government, for example, about the public centers as the hospitals and centers, because, well, we are very aware that the climate change is the biggest emergency that is facing the humanity. So we have to focus on the plant-based system. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah. No, thank you for your comments. If I can comment just a little bit on that. Definitely, there are a bunch of things that need to be done. Climate emergency, as you're mentioning, is something that is stressful. We know, and this is not my saying, but the current animal production system that we have is unsustainable. It won't even feed everyone in the world in the next year. It wouldn't make sense. So putting environment on the other side and tackling your question regarding policy, I mean, it's important to have interventions in policies to learn more about how governments can do it. But in my opinion, coming from a company that is directly working with consumers, it's a consumer-based action. So policies are important, policies are relevant, regulation is fundamental, and understand state of law, that's fundamental. But on the other hand, if people are not ready to take those choices and to learn about better ways in which they can eat, in which they can protect themselves, regarding health issues, as you know, Mexico, Latin America, and other countries have diabetes problems that are pretty high, sorry. If you're not able to tackle that with common sense, it's challenging in the beginning. And if we are expecting for large companies to solve these type of problems, then, well, it hasn't really happened, right? So it's about consumer action. Policy gives a framework, policy gives ideas, regulation is fundamental, but it's about everyday decisions that people are taking. And fortunately, at least in our industry, in our case, we're seeing more consumers in Mexico opting not necessarily to become vegan as in an everyday choice, but they're deciding for different days of the week, right? And when you look, in essence, for our friends from other countries, Mexican food is pretty vegan, you know? So we have those pathways to enter that way.
Of course.
Yeah, I agree very much with Eduardo. In our case, we have limited resources to transfer sustainable practices to farmers. Something that's come up recently, which is responsible sourcing. There's some companies that are buying wheat from farmers, but now they're demanding that they're producing a sustainable way. And that's giving us resources to be able to transfer these sustainable practices. So, you know, very, very much agree with Eduardo that the consumer plays a very important role.
Thank you for these comments. So you had the, sir, you had the.
Yes, sure.
raised it before.
My name is Jose Contreras. I come from the investment world, so I'm very familiar with the problems of all the companies at this stage, startups or big companies that need financing. And what I find very interesting is that all the startup ecosystem that's being funded by international investors, which is very weird that Mexican investors do not access and do not help all these startups grow. So there's a problem, there's a systemic problem with the Mexican financial system that cannot channel money into R&D, as the gentleman said, from the academic world or from the institutions that have been around for many years. And the money does not find a way to invest in those sectors and in those companies. And there's a wave all over the world for impact investment, for example. And the money that's being put to work in Mexican companies is not from Mexican investors, from foreign investors who are taking this opportunity to grow these companies and to make an impact in the social, in the environmental world. So, my proposal is that we find a way for Mexican institutions, Mexican investors to funnel money into all these startups and companies.
And well, just one remark about the investors and international investors specifically. Well, who has the money puts the rules, and international investors look for specific vehicles to put their money in so they can exit at some point. And these vehicles, you might know them as a Cayman Sandwich or C Corp or other kind of vehicles. What happens is that Mexican companies then go to the other countries and fund their companies there just to be able to receive funds from the international investors. So what happens at the end is that companies stop being Mexican, right? That's a little bit of the problem that is in relation to not connecting the Mexican investors with the Mexican startups.
Why do you see that as a problem? I think Mexican startups that become global companies is not a problem.
I don't think it's a problem, but for example, if we would decide now to do the Cayman Sandwich, where would we be paying taxes? And where would the investors pay taxes when they exit? Not in Mexico. That's the only.
Yeah, so it's more like the finance instrument versus the
Exactly.
expansion of the company.
Yeah. Of course, the expansion.
Being a global company is not a problem.
No. The expansion is.
I think we have a couple of questions here.
Hello everyone, my name is Mara Gomez. I'm from Mexico, and I'm in charge of promoting the sustainable practice at the university. I am the Agency coordinator of the sustainable group. We have like a coordinating club and that stuff, and we are precisely looking for what we have to do, right? The potential part here is for you to try these sustainable ways of changing. So my question here is to feel like related to how we can make like sustainable hubs and climate change combat society as a whole. So how would you perceive like you as drivers of change? Or what kind of policy more specifically for us to
From our perspective, when we go to universities or high schools, it is an intrinsic energy that comes from the people that they want to do things. So what we only do is we put challenges and they react, let's say, to these challenges. So the question is, what are the challenges that we have to generate to identify the leaders that will drive impact in the future? And I think this is something that could be done at universities, for example, at your university.
My name is Martha Delgado. I'm a high school student, and I have the opportunity to be a UN youth delegate. I will be attending COP28 in December at Dubai. So, my question goes a little bit more about kind of economics. So, a lot of the strategies or startups that are like working right now with climate change and trying to focus the way of changing things are at high cost. Not everyone in society can manage to ask or to buy certain products to change. So I would ask you, what strategies do you see in the future, or what strategies do you see for people of low income? For example, as youth, or I think kids here that are not part of youth, we all want to do something. That's true. Youth have a drive to change things. We are always thinking how to change things for the future, not even for us, but for the generations that come after us that are coming up. But most of us, or not most of us, but most of the population does not have the access or the opportunity that most of us have. So how do we do this? How do we work with the drive and with the energy of youth to change things? Or do we focus on the people that do not have?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'll say in our case, in our industries, the concept is called price parity. What we're looking to get is to have the same prices as animal protein initially. That's what trigger our larger base of consumption. And we have found different behaviors regarding prices with beef and chicken with our products. We're 25% above on average a kilo of chicken, a kilo of beef here in Mexico. But regarding our non-shrimps, non-tuna, non-fish, we're even more competitive. So the point is, the answer is innovation to achieve better prices and reduce costs. I mean, from a business perspective, that's what we need to do. That's what we're working on. Talking about low-income individuals, we're also focusing on that, at least in Plant Squad. I can say that in the following weeks, you'll start seeing Plant Squad in some stores from Walmart that it's called Bodega Aurrera. If you're familiar with Bodega Aurrera, it serves in remote and low-income regions. And we're developing products specifically for those markets with the same quality of all of our lines, with the same brand and with the same ingredients. And we have been able to achieve that. And it's through innovation and looking into price, because people decide we're looking into prices. So from a business perspective, that's how we see it.
Well, first of all, youth has a huge voice. I would say that one key word would be partnership and focus on solving a problem. At Stanford, we call it social innovation. So if you build these partnerships, you see a problem, you bring partners around, try to improve the status quo. To give you an example, a group of our students saw that Mexican had a very difficult time to access energy efficiency for clean energy for a tortilleria or a laundry or things like that. And they asked if the NREL, the National Lab in the US, with the started a program to give access by combining microlending, fintech to create an alternative credit history, because even the development bank credits were too expensive. So they brought down the cost so they could actually access. So it was an idea of a group of students got together, got the right partners, and went to solve the problem. So you have a lot of fun.
If I may add one thing, I wanted to first think about something because I really agree with what Eduardo said around the price, and we've heard it again. Price is like really a big, an important decision for like, or the main driver of decision for the bottom of the pyramid, right? Because if you live on a day-to-day basis, if the money you earn only brings you throughout one day, you're going to try to ensure that what you spend on gives you like the most energy. It might not be the healthiest, it might not be the most sustainable option. So I think, as if what Eduardo said, our goal has to be to really scale these sustainable options so that with economies of scale, we can make them cheaper. So, I mean, Perfecto, for example, we have already several farmers who would love to work with us and could give us a great price for their imperfect produce that today ends up wasted. But because we don't have the necessary scale yet, we can't access it because they are asking us to buy at least 1 ton of a certain produce per week. We are not there yet with all the products, right? So from our side, for example, we need more scale. As we scale, we can optimize our processes, we can optimize our cost structure so that we can offer a lower price. We are already 30% cheaper than any other grocery delivery service, and we aim to continue that, right? But I think scale is one point, and the other one is a collaboration. We collaborate, for example, with the food banks, with the National Food Bank network in Mexico, the Bamex, and they help us also that on one side, on the educational part, so we do education together, we do campaigns together, but on the other side, we try to save a bit more when we can so that we can distribute it to them. But that's only possible through collaboration. And so spaces like the one that we have today help us to get to know new initiatives, help us to think about new ways to collaborate. And so I think it's on one side economies of scale for better prices, and on the other side collaboration.
I want to be respectful and give everyone the opportunity to and then I'll be just stopping at the time is needed, but we can go in that order you wanted. So we 3, 4, 5, 6. So please.
Maybe I'll go first. So, very good to be here. I'm Sharon Murray. I'm University of Arizona. And I had several questions, but I make a comment and then ask the panel. So on the comment of international funding of startups, we're having this problem in the US that Silicon Valley is funding startups all over the US. They want them to move out. So you really need Mexican, Latin American, and Caribbean investors. The jobs. We can't even keep them. They all move to California. So that's a huge issue. The issue I wanted to ask about, Ron just answered, which is we're all doing fantastic stuff. How do you scale up so we can make a dent in the huge climate problem you have? What is the right word? Process whereby with partnerships you find other companies that are doing the same thing and manage to buy the fund, something like that.
There's close to zero. The problem is that for innovation, you actually have to build an economic agglomeration, concentration of people. That's why Silicon Valley excels around the world. And by being there, you have a network to build these partnerships and scale and grow really quick. So that's one thing. That's why we are trying to help cities that are advising them or informing the policy process to create innovation. Monterrey is very well positioned. Guadalajara has advanced that. Mexico, maybe the Querétaro. There's areas in Mexico that could actually start having that. But also those cities have to provide certain conditions. People want to move there. They want to have a nice environment, safe environment, all the. So you see, innovation hubs matter. So, and that answers also your question about partnerships. If most of the people where you can build partnerships are concentrated in that location, that's what you do.
Maybe one point on the collaboration part, what I've seen is that often it's the lack of access to the right network, right? So yeah, again, Silicon Valley is marvelous because you walk out to a coffee and you might find an investor or you might find someone who can help you out with your business, right? What I've seen is like I'm in a lucky position because we were able to pass through Y Combinator, which is like a very renowned startup accelerator that gives you a lot of connections. But I have a lot of peers, founder peers here in Mexico that didn't have the opportunity to pass through an accelerator like that. And what I'm seeing is they often don't get the connections that they need. They often have an amazing company, really something that can have a huge impact, but they lack access. So I think on the matter of innovation hubs, what we can do here is, for example, create, again, for forums like this one, we can create like initiatives, challenges that are sponsored or at least organized by the government, by universities, by big companies that have the funds to sponsor that. I think it's really a collaborative approach. And for us as startups, well, what we always need, mostly it's capital, right? I think it's really difficult sometimes to scale something. Like the goal with a venture capital is that you can scale something fast, right? And quickly, like Uber did, right? If you don't have that much funding like Uber, it's gonna take a lot more time to actually change the ecosystem in a few years.
Yeah, but if you allow me, also talent.
Yeah.
You need the right people, especially there that are technology sensitive. And that's why education has to also start reconverting.
If you allow, I was in charge at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of bringing Tesla to Mexico. And the three things that they made them deciding coming to our country to install one gigafactory of 1 million electric vehicles a year was, first of all, the ecosystem of free trades that we have with 14 different agreements, 14 different countries, more than 50 countries. Second, of course, the proximity with the plant that they have in Austin, Texas, and Nuevo León. But the third one was the most, I was astonished when they said that they wanted to come to Mexico because Mexico, more or less half of their engineers are Mexican or professionals, like the Monterrey or other public universities. So I learned that education matters, and the professional offer of Mexico is quite good.
General Director of the Council of Science and Technology. The first comment is that while I'm glad to see young people and glad to see entrepreneurs, that this is very Mexico City. And Madam Undersecretary, there's a huge world, intelligent life beyond Mexico City. So please, and take into account the rest of the country. Last whisker on he's the only one who has mentioned both Guadalajara and Monterrey. So I think it's important for everyone to know what's happening in the rest of Mexico. All the efforts that all the national governments are doing, because we all have our own policies in order to promote, especially innovation. Innovation is a huge growth right now. Totally forgotten by policy, and it's pushed aside by the Ministry of Economy. So I think that this is a good idea. We have a huge problem because we, as a culture, we are risk averse, takers, Mexicans hate. So with our pathetic financial system, there's no way this is going to change in the near
cooperation. But I think that one of the best things, and I'm glad you mentioned the Bancos de Alimentos, because I think they're doing an extraordinary job. But I think the only way to go forward is through cooperation. We have very limited access to funds. We have limited access to support from the federal government in general. And so we need to cooperate with each other, especially with other countries. So I'm glad you had this initiative, and please look beyond the periphery of the other.
If I may, I need to say that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we launched last year, a industrial prospective territorial atlas, which we spent 2 years with the ONUDI and the UN Habitat studying all the territory of Mexico, and where we do have not just, infrastructure or other industries, but also the capacity for growing innovation and technology in 5 different sectors: aerospatial, automotive, pharmaceutical, agro-industrial, and infrastructure. So all the territory were scanned, and we located different vocations for innovation in different parts of the Mexican territory, in the Bajío, in the north, in the south, in the Trans-Pacific Corridor, or Tamaulipas, or Veracruz. So I invite all of you to check this atlas. Is also our tool for economic promotion abroad.
So we will take only and then so who were the next? Yes, please.
Yes, I was going to say that I was educated in public institutions. I am a senior consultant for UNDP on waste worldwide, and that is a specific question to the panel. Waste is a cross-cutting issue. Everything we do, we have to call it its name. It is waste, because even astronauts and energy is the other. Of course, money. Was mentioned, but how do you address in your specific areas waste management, hazardous waste, the pesticides, wrappings, the plastics? I am doing projects for India, for Asia on plastic management. So how is it conceived? Will you take the life cycle assessment tool that is should be used for everything we do, also the life cycle cost assessment for the how do you address or how do you plan
that? Our focus is smallholder farmers rather than larger farmers, and there's a little loss, maybe you can call it waste, of grain during storage. So we've done a lot of work on post-harvest technologies to help farmers put their grain in a system where the losses are greatly reduced, basically by using systems that are sealed and don't allow the entry of any oxygen, and that way you can control insects. So that's what we're doing on the agricultural sector, focusing on smallholder farmers.
So on our side, one thing is the reason why we do a subscription model. The reason why we do a subscription model is it allows us to actually foresee the demand and then buy the products that we need. That allows us to ensure that we only buy what we will actually sell and not have waste. That's when it comes to the product. Then when it comes to the packaging, what we do is we don't use any plastics for the packaging. We actually only use a carton box that is made of recycled carton, where we work with a local Mexican company that has all the certifications for that. But on top of that, we have introduced a circular economy model where our customers can actually return those boxes to us, and we can reuse them up to 5 times. If we can't reuse them, then they will be brought to the respective facilities. What we now also want to do, now that we have started to go beyond fruits and veggies, we also want to introduce reverse logistics or a circular economy model for all the other products that we offer. Like, for example, milk, like products like, well, we haven't had Plant Squad yet.
We're almost there.
But what we want to do is also with the partners that we work, that we have the ability to retrieve the packaging waste that would be generated by these products and then hand them over to the respective facility. So we try to also maintain waste at the minimum there.
I will say, I'm sorry.
No, please.
Talking about our packaging, I mean, we select the most environmental friendly packaging that we can. That's how we do it. But on the other, that's the answer coming from a startup, the company that we are. But when we get these questions, the second way in which we address is we need these questions to be asked to the large CPG companies. Because the effect that we have, of course, is important. It's part of our conviction. And we decided to have a reduction in our gross margin selecting this type of products. But in the large effect of packaging in particular, as you mentioned, has to do with the largest companies that are taking those decisions and that are not necessarily having those type of conversations.
Yeah, definitely. And from our side, I mean, waste is our food, right? Waste is our main, raw material. But there's waste inside of waste, like plastic with flame retardants, that need to be identified with a spectrometer that identifies how much brome or chrome or mercury is inside of plastics. And I can assure you that there are no facilities in Mexico other than ours that have this technology. So the plastic contaminated with brome is definitely going to the landfill, or worse, being recycled. So we have found toys with brome, chrome, which is terrible. So there's, of course, waste that has to be, I think only through innovation could be then maybe found a way that ABS can be 3D printing. I don't know. There's something that could be done.
Or policy. That's a case in which policies dictate how things should be done.
Should be, yeah, but we have like the remainings from the last 25 years of waste that still has a lot of contaminants. So that's still there. Yeah. But innovation is, I think, the only way that we could lower the cost of dealing with this waste inside of waste.
We would just go through the last question and then wrap it up.
Good afternoon. My name is Aranza Ramirez. I'm the General Secretary for. And my question will be giving a little bit of social context. I was trying to be a vegetarian, as you were saying, a year ago, but my social context didn't allow me to become a vegetarian because of the economics and also because of the traditional family. Traditional families in Mexico always have this idea that becoming plant-based diet always has these repercussions in our health. As I was trying to do some research and trying to explain the way that it doesn't have a negative impact in our plant-based diet, my family says no. So as young generations and also as future activists, what can we do to make our society conscious about the plant-based diet and what are the benefits and not be focused on the negative impact that it has on our diet. Continuing with this context, continuing with this context, also my family was saying like, I come from a family of doctors. They started giving me vitamins. And me with my research, I tried to understand and try to explain that maybe this wasn't at all like necessary. No? And the protein, they were talking about the protein, that vegetable protein is maybe not real protein, which I'm totally against. But how as future generations and future activists can we make sound and can we make a repercussion in our traditional society?
So I have the answer. No, I don't have the answer. So I'm going to tell you something. So of course I'm plant-based, vegan, and that's in what I do. I haven't been able to convince my father, who is in the medical field, that having a plant-based diet is a good thing, right? So I understand those resistances, and I go back to the first answer that I gave. It has to do with the spirit that you have in looking for information and understanding that. But talking in particular about the conditions of Mexico or Latin American countries, if you allow me to generalize in that way, being vegan and having a healthy diet, and I know what I'm going to say comes from the privilege of my life and where I am, but it's not that expensive. Having access to rice, having access to beans, having access to water, a bunch of vegetables that are in our countries, or at least here in Mexico, it's simple. I'm not saying that it's cheaper or anything like that, but it's affordable. What you mentioned is one of the most important, at least, phenomena that we see regarding behavior, in which, of course, societies have been accustomed to aspire as we have more wealth to go for animal protein, to have other type of products, and start consuming that. But in essence, when we talk about plant-based food and having a good plant-based nutrition, it's not about only buying Plant Squad and our analogs of beef or chicken. It's about going for your beans, going for your quinoa, going for your corn, going for the products that are already available to us, the products that are perfectly selling, which that is, in essence, a great plant-based diet. And if you can put it up with Plant Squad, that's great. But it's there. But it's a resistance, and it's something that has to be doing, and changes are coming all the time. So this is the change in which we are. This is the resistance that we're facing. And we just need to be up for the challenge and talking about it.